Welcome to Book Watch, the podcast where pages meet screens. I'm your host, Sarah-Daye. Each week, I'll be joined by amazing guests to dive deep into the world of adaptations, comparing beloved books with their cinematic counterparts. From faithful retellings to bold reimaginings, we'll break down what worked, what didn't, and what made each adaptation unforgettable. Whether you're a bookworm, a movie buff, or both, you are in the right place. So grab your bookmark, grab your popcorn, and let's watch some books. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of Book Watch. I'm your host, Sarah-Daye McDougall, and today I am joined by Megan Lachowski, one of my besties, although she's all the way across the United States from me. But Megan, this was when I told you about the podcast, you were like, I have to do Bridgerton with you, and you convinced me to read The Duke and I, and I will be reading the rest of the series as well. But tell me why this adaptation, this book, and the show was so important to you to be on with me for this podcast.
Because most people that I know who have any relationship to Bridgerton have watched the Netflix show and have not read the books. And the show is so different in every single way other than character names. And I felt like it was really important to begin the conversation, to share with the world that there's a big difference. And a lot of people don't really take Bridgerton seriously because it's a drama sexy show. And that's not the whole story, I feel like. So I wanted to start that conversation to show people that there's so much more that goes on in that world and that it's not all that it seems from a TV show perspective.
And I'm excited to get into those differences with you because I was blown away when I read the book. I saw, so I saw all 3 seasons of Bridgerton plus Queen Charlotte before reading The Duke and I. And so when I finally got to The Duke and I mean, it's literally just Daphne and Simon, and all of the other plots and everything is Queen Charlotte's not even a thing. And I'm like, Queen Charlotte is my favorite part of the show. So it was so mind-boggling, but I'm excited to get into the conversation with you. But yes, listeners, of course, we are going to be talking about The Duke and I, which is the first book of the Bridgerton series by Julia Quinn, which was released in 2000.
I keep forgetting. I always forget that the books were released so long ago. I mean, they're not really written like they were released that long ago. You know, they feel really modern. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And I am just pulling up who did the audiobook so I can give credit where credit is due. The audiobook is narrated by Rosalind Landor, and I really liked her narration. And then that brings us to the Netflix show. So, of course, Netflix, Shondaland is the producer, Shonda Rhimes, and Betsy Beers also executive produced. The creator and showrunner is Chris Van Dusen. And the first episode was directed by Julie Ann Robinson. The rest of the episodes were directed by Tom Verica. And again, this is the first season of the Bridgerton show. Let's kind of talk about some of the key themes from the book and how they transferred onto the screen. We can get into what was added as well, but primarily for family relationships, the Bridgertons in general and their relationship as a close-knit family seems to be really prominent, but also the juxtaposition of their family against Simon and his father.
Well, I felt like that was more accurate than a lot of the other plot points or a lot of the other relationships, even though it was not. I feel like almost everything that I saw in the TV show was not what I expected, just because they changed so much. So there were, I don't know, it felt different because all of it felt different, but I do at least feel like the hatred that the Duke felt for his father, that Simon felt for his
Mm.
father, was palpable. And I think in the book, that is one of the most contentious relationships, because the book is so much more lighthearted in general, which I'm sure we'll get into. There's a lot less drama in the
Yeah.
books, but I do feel like Simon and his father, that relationship, you can tell in the book that there is a lot of um animosity between them, like, to say it diplomatically. And so I do feel like that came across in the show clearly. But it was also like intensified, like the death scene, when he goes up and he's like, I will never marry, to his dying father. I was like, okay, that's, I don't know how realistic is that, right? That somebody would do that. But yeah, but I feel like at least there was a lot of hatred in the book, it felt like, between them. So
Well, and also we get all of that in the prologue of the book, whereas in the show it's divided into flashbacks throughout the season, so it's not hitting us all at once. So when we're reading the book, we're opening the book, this story, with this relationship, and we're already getting to know why Simon is the way Simon is, whereas in the
Mhm.
show we get to breathe in between these
Yeah.
little flashbacks.
Yeah, and I do like the flashbacks in the show, but I also like how they just, in the prologue, Julia Quinn did just kind of get it out there so that you know right away when you're introduced to Simon really what the story is there. So I like both. I guess I don't really
Mhm.
have a major preference either way.
And speaking of Simon and his relationship with his father, I think another key theme of this book is trauma and emotional healing, and kind of like generational trauma and how kids deal with that. And Simon is the main example of that trauma.
Yeah, I really like that they don't shy away from it. And again, even though I take issue with how dramatized the TV show is, because I think it cheapens the book in a way. It's like it
Mhm.
cheapens the relationships, and because when you're over dramatizing it, it's almost like you're not trusting the audience to be able to understand like the nuances of friendships and relationships and family dynamics. So when it's, this is a problem I think
Right.
for TV in general. Um, but I think that the trauma that's displayed in the show, or the, I guess the way that they display the trauma, I think it's real. And so I think that they do a good job with showcasing that. The show is made really well and the acting is incredible. So I think that they
Yeah.
do a good job with that. And then in the books, same thing. It's just in a different way that they show it. And it's actually pretty incredible that they're able
Mhm.
to discuss the trauma in the book in such a lighthearted way. Like Julia Quinn is a really good author at being able to do that. And I think, well, you and I talk about Harry Potter all the time on our podcast, Pete's
Right.
Gab Fest, but also just in general. And I think it's similar. J.K. Rowling is really good at writing about traumatic and horrible things, but in a lighthearted way, because the books have a lighthearted feel. So I think
Right.
there's parallels there. Anyways, so I do appreciate that there is a lot of trauma and a lot of family dynamics that is discussed, because that is real in modern times, but also back then. I can't even imagine,
Mhm.
having to be in these family situations, trying to find marriage just to climb up in society or whatever, being expected to marry. And so I think that they just
Mhm.
do a good job with demonstrating that.
Well, and that's a really great segue into the next key theme, which is societal expectations. And I feel like Daphne is kind of the embodiment of that key theme, and how, like, her whole process of needing to find a husband and going out into society.
I do think that the TV show made that more real, what women in particular have to go through. Again, I can't even imagine being in the situation that Daphne's in, or that people in her status in society are in, where you literally have no choice other than you have to be married, or else you will be, in poverty, because that's how life was structured up until um, scarily recently. Women have had to find a male partner in order to be
Right.
able to be comfortable in life at all. And so I think that the TV show did demonstrate that more, um, because the books are so lighthearted that it's almost like it kind of glosses over it. You still get a sense of it, but I do appreciate that about the show because I think it is a real problem that a lot of people are kind of ignorant to. And so I like that the show dramatized that specifically more than the books did.
Yeah. Um, it's always interesting to see or read stories from this Regency era and, um, see how far we've come and yet so how far we do still have to come. But I do like the story that Julia Quinn wrote, and I'm excited to see how she tells more stories
Yeah.
within this societal expectation of that era.
Yes.
Um, so Megan, why do you
Yes.
think this book was chosen for an adaptation, especially since it's such a different telling of the story?
Wait, clarify what you're asking. Why do you think it was chosen?
Yeah, why do you think this series was chosen to be adapted into a TV show?
Got it, in general. Um, well, I guess I don't know because the show is so different than the books. And I didn't really hear about the books. It's not like they were some crazily popular phenomenon as a book series.
Right.
I think that there were more people that knew about it than I thought, but yeah, it is interesting that it was chosen, but I don't know, maybe Shonda just really liked the series or her and Julia Quinn knew each other or something. I'm glad that it did happen. But yeah, I don't know. But it's a great idea. Like it makes sense that it should be adapted.
Yeah,
What a great way to make money for a TV show, first of all, because you have 8 books that are already written. But yeah,
right.
I don't know why. Cuz Fourth Wing makes sense and like the ACOTAR series, like those make sense because they're like
Right.
crazy popular, but this series wasn't necessarily.
Mhm. So we're going to get into our characters here in a moment. Now, because it's so different, and I feel like I probably should have switched the formatting of my episodes for this book because there's so much added. And we should have talked about the key plot points first because when I went to do my list of characters, I just wrote Daphne and Simon because in the book, the rest of the Bridgertons and like Penelope and the Featheringtons, and Queen Charlotte, like I mentioned earlier, they're mentioned in the book, but they're not characters. Like they don't have stories. And then the one bartender guy and his wife, like they're not in the book. So I only wrote down, Daphne and Simon. But if you think that we should get into the casting of the other Bridgertons or wait until their season, let me know. First, we have Daphne. Daphne Bridgerton is played by Phoebe Dynevor, and Simon Bassett, the Duke of Hastings, is played by Roger Jean Page. So, Megan, tell me what you thought about the casting of our two main characters.
Not on board with Daphne and the casting. I mean, Phoebe is beautiful and I think that she's a fantastic actress, but not at all who I would have envisioned for Daphne. She looks like a Daphne. Like she looks like a person named Daphne, but I don't think that she captured the vibe of the book Daphne at all. However, I think that
Mhm.
for what they did in the show, I guess what they were going for, I suppose it makes more sense. I feel like she's a lot more uptight and like in the book, Daphne is written as everybody's friend and like really warm and that does not come across to me in the TV show, but the TV show has so many changes that the way that she portrayed that character or
Mhm.
the way that the director, asked her to portray it, whatever happened, it fits more.
Mhm.
But absolutely, no, I was like the first scene, I was like, oh my God, this doesn't even feel like Daphne at all. Um,
Right.
Simon, I feel like they nailed it with his casting. I feel like just like the aura about him was definitely captured much more than Daphne. Um, but yeah, so I think that those are fine. I think are we talking about their connection yet, or is that going to be in another
Yeah,
segment?
yeah, absolutely.
I think that their
Like their
connection that they
chemistry with each other?
yeah, I do think that for the TV show, I think that their chemistry works, and I think that they did a good job with that. But again, overall, does not feel like it has the same vibe as the book for me.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And I like going back to Daphne and the change in her character. I feel like she was more playful and not more tomboyish in in the book. But yeah, like she just correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you've read it quite a bit more than I have, a few more times than I have read the book only once. But did they say that like the boys weren't going after her because like she's their friend, like they see her as a friend, not
Yes.
as a wife?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then in the show, this is her first season, whereas in the book it's her second season. Um, and so and she's the diamond of the season in the show. So
Yeah.
she's a lot more desirable in the show than she is in the book.
Yeah. And I didn't like, again, that was like right off the bat, I didn't like that they changed that because it just transforms so much about the whole plot. So I didn't like that because it automatically turned Daphne into like the impression from the audience is more that she is that diamond, and it's like, but that's not at all like the whole point of Daphne's experience, I guess, being on the market now. And so I just didn't
Right.
like that they changed that. And yeah, that's a huge transformation that she couldn't get, quote unquote, couldn't get a suitor before because she was friends with everyone. And that vibe does not come across in
Mhm.
the show. She's nice. She doesn't seem like she's a
No.
an annoying person to hang out with or whatever, but she doesn't give off that tomboyish type of like kind of friends with everyone, lighthearted, giggly type of vibe that was like
Mhm.
the
And
main point of her in the book.
I do think that Phoebe could have portrayed that, but that's just not the route that the showrunners and the directors wanted to go for some reason. And we'll talk
Yes.
about that a lot more next week, I think, when we get into the key plot points,
Mhm.
um, on why we think they went this route. But do you want to talk about any other casting? Is there anybody that stands out that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I really like Lady Danbury. I think that her casting was great. I think that Penelope was great. Um, uh,
Oh, yeah, and we'll definitely talk a lot more about
yeah,
Penelope in book 3.
yes.
Lady Danbury is played by Adjoa Ando, and forgive me, listeners, if I butchered that name. But yeah, I
Mhm.
love her as Lady Danbury, and again, I don't think we got her as much in the book.
Yeah.
But I it was hard for me to go to the book after seeing the show because I do like
Mhm.
the ensemble cast of the show, and
Mhm.
to have it be such a more narrow story in the book was very jarring for me.
Yeah, it is a lot different. And I like both for what they are. I like that the books are they're like a perfect little read. They're a perfect,
Yes.
relatively quick romance novel. They get the point across. The characters still feel full. Like I really like what she did, and I think that they totally make sense for a series. But I really like that in the show they did spend a lot more time developing these other characters. I think that some of them I think that some of the characters could have been featured less and they could have focused a lot more on Daphne and Simon
Sure.
and then a little bit on some of the side characters and instead thought about doing spin-off shows like the Modiste. I think that she should have a spin-off show. I think that that would be she's a really interesting
Oh,
character
yeah.
and like doesn't exist and the boxer and his wife like they, or the
Yeah.
bartender. Um so I think that there is so
Right.
much to go off of with these characters, but so I'm fine with both. They're just really different, obviously.
Let me ask
Um
you this.
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you think that it would have been better if it was a movie instead, and like a series of Netflix movies instead of a TV show?
Not necessarily, although I would be so curious to see what they would do with a movie. Like I would be fine with watching it. So, um yeah, I mean, I am fine with it being a show. I think that either way, I mean, I like the idea of including all of these other spin-off side characters. So I like that they were able to do that in a show because the show was what, 8 hours ish long. Like it was that a lot more content than would
Mhm.
be in a movie. So I like that they had so much room to breathe with it, but maybe if they did a movie that was a lot more focused on Daphne and Simon and then also included a mini series or TV show that, you know, featured side characters or something. So I guess I'd be fine either way. I mean, the my biggest issue is just that the lightheartedness is completely gone in the TV show. So I'm always going to go back to that.
Yeah, I do agree that there's the book is a lot more lighthearted, and it's just like you said, a quick romance speech read. But I do think the show doesn't take itself too seriously either. Like it is a fun, silly trash TV almost.
Mhm. Yeah, which is totally fine for, like, what they're going for. I guess I get, like, protective of it because I think that the books are so good, and it's almost like a lot of
Yeah,
people mocked the Bridgerton show because it does have it turn into a kinda trashy feel because it adds so much more drama and
right.
sex, and so I feel protective of the
Yeah.
series because of that, although it's still entertaining to watch, so it's not like I dislike watching it. It just makes me feel like a mama bear.
Okay, you had mentioned Penelope, played by Nicola Coughlan. Was there anybody else that you wanted to draw attention to before we kind of wrap up our first episode?
I feel like Violet Bridgerton, I do like her casting. I think at first I wasn't sure. I think she looks the part, like just like a pretty woman of that age with the brown hair. Like I feel like she was fine, but I wasn't as on board with her again, but I think that's because of the vibe of the show in general was directed so much different.
Mhm.
But like on rewatch, I think that they did a really good job with casting her. I think all the siblings in general
And
are casted okay. Like Eloise, I think is fantastic. I think that they really captured her essence, and I cannot wait for her season. I think it's going to be super fun. The young ones, Hyacinth, I feel like they got her. I mean, one of the youngest child syndrome, like that sort of, you know, the young kid behavior. So she's little now, so we're seeing her literally as a child, but in her book she has that young energy, so I think that already they casted her really
mhm.
well, and I'm really excited to see how she develops. I think Anthony, sorry, he's Jonathan Bailey is going to be fantastic in whatever role he's in, so I think that they casted him well,
Yes.
um perfectly actually. Just like the vibe is so different. So it's hard to get past that. But as far as the way that he looks, the way that he portrays his character and stuff, I think that they did a great job with him. I'm not sold yet on Benedict, but we haven't really seen much of him. So that one I'm not too
Mm,
worried about yet.
okay. So let me just run through the actors here. Lady Violet Bridgerton is played by Ruth Gemmell. Colin is played by Luke Newton. Benedict is played by Luke Thompson. And then you already mentioned Jonathan Bailey, who is like, I also have just recently seen Wicked, and I'm now obsessed with Jonathan Bailey, and I want to see everything that he's ever in. Eloise Bridgerton is played by Claudia Jesse. Hyacinth is played by Florence Hunt. Um, and they recast the other sister. Forgive me, what's her name?
Um
Francesca?
Elo- Francesca, yes.
Yeah. So they recast her. Um, and then the last Bridgerton is Gregory, which was played by Will Tilston in the first season. And is that all of them?
Did you say 8?
I don't know.
Yeah, Anthony,
Listeners, you can write it and
Benedict,
tell me who I forgot.
Colin, Daphne, Eloise, Francesca, George, Hyacinth.
That's right. I just have to go in alphabetical order.
Yes.
Um, okay, one character that I wanna talk about actually that I just saw, Marina Thompson, played by Ruby Barker in the show, not in the
Yeah.
book.
No. Yeah, I think I like her character. I think that she's cute. She does a good job with what they had her do, but that was one of those like, what's happening here? Like what is going on?
And
So
we can
she
get more into that in the next
Mhm.
episode, but did you like that storyline at all? Because it is an added, well, I think it's an added storyline. It's definitely not in the first book. I haven't read any other books. I haven't gotten to Colin's book yet. So, what did you think of that? And like you said that you were surprised by this. So tell me more about your feelings about that whole storyline.
um I I was like just like what I don't like that it was added in, I guess. It's interesting, I guess. It's an interesting story, but to me it didn't really add to the story. It just was yet
Mhm,
another side character. It wasn't
mhm, more
enhancing
drama.
anything. Yeah, it wasn't enhancing anything to do with the point of this season, which was supposed to be about Daphne and Simon. So for me, I feel
Right.
like it took away from the point of this season's plot. And further, I think it created a lot more of it made Lady Featherington much less likable. Not that she was super likable in the books, because as we'll get into Penelope's story, we'll find out more. So it's not like she's everybody's favorite, but I feel like it really turned
Mhm.
her into like this evil woman with how they portrayed that plot line, and I'm like, this just feels unnecessary, and it's not adding anything to Diamond and Daphne, um Daphne and Simon's story. I feel like if it had enhanced that storyline or fit in more with the Bridgertons in general, then maybe. But they probably have a plan for that for later seasons in the TV show that will become apparent later. But to me, it almost felt like a distraction from the point of what they were trying to make.
Yeah. Um, but Miss Featherington, she is another example of the societal expectations and the pressure that those expectations
Yeah.
put on the families and having to meet those expectations and what you're willing to do to meet those expectations.
I do agree, and I think that that the show did really again emphasize what women have had to go through in order to be accepted in society, and how they can
Mhm.
be completely ostracized or worse if they do anything that's not deemed perfectly appropriate. So I do like that that came across. To me, it just felt like it felt to me like it was very clearly added in. Like they were trying to add that in as a side
Mhm.
plot. To me, it didn't feel like it fit as much, but that also is probably just because I know what the book plot line is. So perhaps if there was no book
Right.
plot that we had to compare it to, then maybe we would feel differently about it.
Mhm. Okay, so Megan, tell me, do you think that the show is a faithful adaptation or a bold
No,
reimagining?
a bold reimagining. Like not even
Yeah, I think that was
faithful in
pretty
the
clear
least.
from the beginning.
They kept the name Daphne and
Do you like
Simon.
the bold reimagining?
No,
Right.
overall, no. I will say that is my short answer.
Mhm.
The long answer of, I can see what they were trying to do to make it into a dramatic, interesting TV show. The acting is incredible. The diversity of the characters is incredible. The way that the show is designed, the literally the filming of it and the set and everything. Like, so there's so much about the show that is incredible.
Mhm.
As
But
an
story-wise, not so much.
adaptation, no. What are they doing?
All right. Well, Megan, thank you so much for joining me on
Thanks for
this first
having
episode of
me.
the Bridgerton chat.
Mhm.
Is there anywhere you would like followers, listeners to find you on the internet?
You can find me just on my regular old Instagram page at Megan, MEGAN _ Lachowski, LACHOWSKI. And then right now, the only other creative project I have going on is teaching Cuban dance, but that's local. So if you're not local, sorry, I don't know how helpful that will be for you. But if you decide to pay attention to anything that I'm doing there on my personal page, when I do have another creative something going on, then I'll be linking it there. But otherwise, you're all welcome to watch my stories or whatever you feel like doing on my Instagram page.
Well, thank you again for joining me, and listeners, we will see you next week. That's a wrap for today's episode of Book Watch. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of page-to-screen adaptations. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share it with your fellow book and movie lovers. If you'd prefer to watch along, you can check the show out on YouTube. You can follow the show on Instagram at Bookwatch Podcast, and you can follow me, Sarah-Daye, on Instagram at captain.mcdee. That's MCDEE. You can also join the conversation in the Book Watch Lounge on Facebook at www.facebook.com/groups/bookwatchlounge. If you would like to support the podcast, you can join the Patreon at www.patreon.com/bookwatchpodcast. Tiers start at only $4 a month, and I'd love to have you over there. If you have a favorite adaptation you'd like to cover with me, I'd love for you to apply to be on the show with the contact form on our website at www.bookwatchpodcast.com. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and I'll see you next week.